It's been 7 very long years since Daredevil was unfairly ripped away from us by Netflix. 7 years of torment and agony as I've longed to see one of my favorite characters take the spotlight once again, after being cut off way too soon. 7 years of waiting patiently for today when I can finally say that Daredevil has been born again in the MCU. God, I can't tell you how long I've waited to say that. It has been a very challenging road to get here, to say the least, as we've had to go through a drastic creative shakeup that has led to where we are today. And now that this first season is over and went by way too fast, I have an unhealthy amount of thoughts on this first season. So let's not waste any more time because I can already tell that this is going to be a long one. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but Daredevil is my favorite show of all time. It introduced me to a character who practically changed my life and immediately made me fall in love with his corner of the Marvel universe. It has some of the best writing, and not just any superhero show, but any show in general, as they handled complex themes of morality, vigilantism, and faith with so much nuance and grace, all while delivering on some of the most hard-hitting and exciting action in the entire genre. So to say I had high expectations for this long-awaited follow-up would be the understatement of the century. Never in my life have I been more excited for a show, and I am so happy to report to you all that I was not disappointed at all, especially for a show that went through such a public shift behind the scenes as Marvel scrapped entire episodes and brought on a new creative team. Daredevil Born Again perfectly recaptures the essence of the original series, all while continuing this narrative in bold new ways that go even further than the Netflix show ever could have. It's thrilling to watch these dueling narratives play out as Matt and Fisk try and better themselves and the city they've sworn to protect in their own, very unique ways. The slow burn build up to an explosive conclusion is very worthwhile as they somehow manage to find a way to tie everything together, all while setting up years worth of new Daredevil stories to be told. Is it perfect? Definitely not. I will be the first to tell you that. The CGI is noticeable in the rare instances that they use it, and the absence of a few supporting characters is greatly felt, but considering the fact that this show consists of two distinct creative visions, Frankenstein together, and still flows this cohesively, it's all the more impressive to me. I was concerned about how this show was reworked going into it, but it took me by surprise just how well it actually worked out in the long term. Funnily enough, the rework mirrors the themes of the show itself in a very meta way. Marvel tried their best to move away from the original Netflix series and start fresh, only to come crashing back down to reality and realize that they needed all that history to build off of. And while you can definitely tell that Born Again is a hybrid of two shows battling it out for supremacy, every single story beat is made in a very natural way that feels like an honest attempt at picking up right where they left off. And while the old team may want to spit on everything I hold sacred, the new showrunner, Dario Scartapane, makes it very clear that he has a deep love for the Netflix series and wants what the fans do as well. As much as I loved this season here, I am especially excited to see what this new team is cooking up for next year when they aren't tied down to any pre-existing footage and can let loose with their own unique ideas. But even with how the show is stitched back together, it never gets distracting, as the show genuinely plays out as if this was the plan from the beginning. If you told someone who didn't know about all the behind-the-scenes drama to watch the show, I doubt they'd even have a clue of what happened. It is just that good. Also, I decided that there's going to be spoilers in this review, so watch it at your own risk, but just go watch the show. It's really worth it. One of the strongest parts of Born Again, though, is Matt's character arc throughout the season, which is great, because imagine if the lead of your show didn't have anything interesting to do. Surely Marvel would never do that. The emotional journey Matt is unwillingly pulled through over the course of these 8 episodes unfolds in such a natural way that is incredibly well written. Unless you've been living under a rock and avoided all Daredevil discourse until this video, which would be equally insane and impressive, then I'm sure you know the big spoiler, pause for dramatic effect to make sure everyone can click off who doesn't want to hear this, that Foggy dies 8 minutes into the first episode. I already made a full video with my thoughts on that moment, so go watch that after if you want to hear me coping, but for as much as I don't agree with the decision to kill him off and his absence is greatly felt, they don't let that moment go to waste for a second. The new creative team fully understands the weight that killing off the most important supporting character would have not just on Matt, but the entire show as a whole. So instead of the bizarre original plan that had Foggy dying off screen and just moving on from it, they do the smart thing and make sure the effects of that ripple throughout the entire season, and I am so grateful for that. Every single decision Matt makes after that tragic night is entirely guided by his feelings for Foggy, as he wants to honor his memory and get justice for him. Whether that be trying to kill Bullseye without hesitation out of an overwhelming sense of vengeance, or quitting being Daredevil entirely, Matt is making choices based on what he thinks is best for Foggy. And we see just how different and empty Matt's life is without his anchor. It's a small, unspoken moment, but Matt's reaction to Bullseye's guilty verdict has stuck with me for all these weeks. You'd think he'd be happy that Dex is getting life in prison, but he lets out this burst of rage through body language alone, and the message is loud and clear. He's disappointed that Dex wasn't given the death penalty. He did his best to kill that man that night, and it wasn't enough, so maybe the legal system would handle it. And when it doesn't, he's forced to sit there with his thoughts about how he wanted that man to die and the complete and utter disappointment that he survives. Those dark emotions hang over him like a cloud for the rest of the series, no matter what he does. For as controversial as that first episode is, it does such a great job defining who Matt Murdock is as a character in this new era of the MCU. Charlie Cox is just such a good actor, man. I'm so glad that we have him playing Daredevil. I hope we honestly get to see him doing this until he's 90. I never want this to stop. And while Matt being retired as Daredevil is a jarring status quo to accept when this season begins, I think it's handled as close to perfectly as you can get. Originally, I thought that Matt would go off the rails and try and kill himself if he ever lost Foggy, but I love that he tries to suppress those feelings instead. It caught me off guard at first, but Matt trying to do something good for once and let the law handle things because he knows it's what Foggy would have wanted is so powerful. Even in his final conversation with Matt, Foggy didn't want to give him a reason to suit up as Daredevil. So I think it's such an interesting decision for Matt's character to lean the complete opposite way for once and try and better his life. After his best friend lost his life, it's almost like Matt is trying to make the most out of his own life and live how Foggy would have wanted in order to properly honor his dying wish of not having a reason to suit up and almost live vicariously for Foggy. But here's the thing. This whole new life Matt has built up for himself is very clearly a facade. As we all know, Matt Murdock is never allowed to be happy for more than 5 minutes. He got to have a little side quest in She-Hulk where he experienced joy for the first time in his life, but Born Again made sure he paid for that by destroying his entire life. And he can tell himself that he's content all he wants, but anyone can see the truth. Matt Murdock is miserable and uses this new life as a cover-up to hide that. He tells himself this is what he wants, but he doesn't believe it. It's all a performance to trick both himself and the rest of the world into thinking that he's okay after what happened. He's distant with all of his friends and struggles to even say Foggy's name when Frank pushes him to, because the moment that facade starts to crack, we see Matt's true self. That reawakens something in him as he caves in for the first time and gives that billy club a spin, just to get it all out of his system. Something so harmless, but it shows that the itch is getting harder to ignore. He is a broken man with a shattered moral compass, desperately trying to make this work despite it going against his nature. It's only once Heather manages to pry her way through this thick exterior that he's finally forced to open up about his coping mechanism. He admits to himself for the first time that this new life feels fake, as he's very clearly uncomfortable with the idea of moving on without his friends and acting like nothing is wrong. It almost feels meta how he's addressing that none of this is right, as if he's speaking directly to the audience and acknowledging how wrong this new setting is. It worked incredibly well for me as it vindicated those feelings I had and showed that Matt isn't as put together as he tries to present. Honestly, it gave me very heavy Mark Waid vibes, as in that comic run, Matt put on a facade to try and convince himself that he was happy, which I love because that is my all-time favorite Daredevil run. It's such a compelling direction to take Matt's character and directly comment on this status quo change in a way that feels natural for him and shows how much he truly misses being Daredevil. Why else would he have kept that broken horn Karen gave him? And not only does he keep it, but he carries it around with him everywhere he goes like a baby with their blanket. It's such a great way to show that he can't completely part with Daredevil through visual language alone, as we constantly see him playing around with it and contemplating if he's doing the right thing. I think what I love most about Matt's character arc is that it's almost done entirely through showing us things rather than directly telling us. It's a lot less in your face than I was expecting it to be, as we see Matt dance with the devil and come inches away from embracing his violent urges, but he always finds a way to stop himself. My favorite example of this by far is how Born Again tackles Matt's faith. Obviously, an incredibly important part of the character, and while it isn't as prominent as it is in the other seasons, that's for good reason. After Foggy died, it seems like Matt hasn't allowed himself to go to church, as if he's afraid of confessing his cardinal sin of letting his best friend die, and that if he never goes back, it almost doesn't feel real, and he can continue to live in this fantasy world. He's cut himself off from God's love because he doesn't think he's worthy of it anymore, only allowing himself to listen from a distance. It's an incredibly powerful moment that directly shows how far he's fallen in his own eyes. And due to the fact that Matt refuses to open up with anyone, all of that is communicated through some really excellent visual language. They do everything they can to make you see that this man is completely broken, and that even in religion, his place of peace that he's always relied on to guide him, he's almost completely ignoring because that Catholic guilt is hitting him like a truck. And don't even get me started on how he carries Foggy's obituary around with him wherever he goes. That had me ready to completely end it all. I miss those two together so much. But despite all that, he still continues to pray in his private time and practice God's teaching in a whole new way as he desperately clings on to any sense of his former life that he can. Matt sitting around in court as if it's a church, fiddling around with that broken horn, is one of those scenes that is always going to stick with me. While he can't bring himself to enter a real one, using the court as this new place of peace is such inspired symbolism and the perfect embodiment embodiment of what makes this character so special, the lawyer aspect of his character is not forgotten as he uses it as a form of escapism to try and do any kind of good the right way. But at the end of the day, it goes against his nature to just be a lawyer. No matter how hard he fights in that courtroom, it'll never be enough, and he knows it. His moral compass is in a constant tennis match against itself, going back and forth between being a lawyer and a vigilante, and it's what makes this character so compelling because there's no way that's healthy for someone. We're shown constant reminders of that through Hector's hijacked innocence and the way the system failed Leroy Bradley, even Bullseye's life being spared to an extent. Matt is forced to see firsthand that the system is failing his city as it almost taunts him to don the horns again. It all starts with Fisk becoming the mayor, acting as the match to light a fire under Matt and wake him up from this unreality he's forced himself into. And because of that, Matt is beaten down with too many reasons to become Daredevil as he becomes more and more disillusioned with the law as a whole. It isn't until he's backed into a corner when trying to save a witness's life that he finally snaps as they force him to embrace his darker half for the first time in over a year. Matt literally begging them not to start a fight, not because he's scared for his health, but because he's scared for theirs, goes ridiculously hard, pleading with them to walk away so he doesn't have to get hooked on violence again, only to let loose and finally relapse. All his hard work to cut that part of him away, undone in one foul swoop as he embraces his addiction once again. With one primal scream, he lets the devil in, and I was ready to run through a wall. As opposed to some other fight scenes in this show, I really like how choppy this one is edited. It feels frantic and kinetic as Matt is getting this overwhelming rush of adrenaline, and it adds this sense of urgency and mania as Matt is getting lost in the moment, knowing that after that, he can never go back to the life he's been trying to live. God, I love the direction they took Matt this season and all the choices he made. It's a slow burn for sure, but the writing is so compelling that you don't even mind not seeing Daredevil for entire episodes. It builds and builds and builds until the series explodes into a beautifully violent crescendo as Daredevil is born again as the protector this city needs. Matt working so hard to resist falling back into his old ways as Daredevil and let the law handle it, only to finally relapse with a simple "fuck it." Goes so hard. But I think my favorite part of his characterization in the show is the fact that Matt is such a whore. Oh my god. This man is out here flirting with other women while in a relationship, mind you, just to get his clients better treatment, and my god do I love it. This man is a walking disaster who has unfathomable amounts of riz, and I'm very glad that this show has leaned into just how flirtatious he really is. It's such a small detail, but showing him as this promiscuous character does a lot to show you just how messy his life really is, especially when you consider the religious aspect to it all. I adore the fact that he just gets around all the time. His characterization as a whole is on point in Born Again. He's more depressed than ever, but masking it with this fake happiness that gives him a more hopeful personality, all while still feeling in line with how we know Matt Murdock should act. He's not going to hesitate to be as sassy as possible or make a joke, but there's still a deep sadness to him and a rage boiling over under the surface. You can tell that time has passed, but it's still the same character we've all come to know and love. As Charlie Cox is giving inarguably his best performance as Daredevil, the range of emotions he's allowed to portray, whether that be bawling his eyes out on the rooftop, or letting his rage spill out, or the rare moments he gets to be happy. There is no comic book actor who understands their character quite like Charlie Cox does, but what really makes Matt's character arc land is how they parallel it with the Kingpin's journey this season. Despite these two having a complete opposite set of morals, they operate as two sides of the same coin. Each of them is fueled by this innate lust for violence that they struggle to keep at bay, but it's how they handle it where the differences begin to appear. Fisk channels his rage into power and fear as he uses that to get ahead and grab the world by the throat, while Matt's anger comes from a place of guilt as he does whatever he can to seek justice on the streets of Hell's Kitchen. They both can't function without letting out their violent nature, and Born Again explores that as the central theme of the series. It's very obviously a new chapter in Matt and Fisk's lives as they've both lost their anchors. Matt is completely directionless without having Foggy there to keep him centered, and Fisk is simmering with rage at the mere thought of someone else being with Vanessa. And they have nobody else to blame but themselves for what happened. Matt's self-destructive Catholic guilt has him completely blaming himself for not being there to save Foggy, while Fisk skipping town on Vanessa pushed her away and towards an affair. And because of that, they're both attempting to fill the void in their lives with these new ventures. Matt throws himself into his work to do things by the book, while Fisk aims to take advantage of that book in an attempt to regain power after losing control of his criminal empire. Even with how unfortunate it is that my King Ray Nadim's sacrifice was for nothing in the end, I really loved the decision to have Fisk and Matt barely interact this season because despite their limited confrontations, it still feels like they're connected in the ways their arcs mirror each other. On the surface, they're both trying to do things the right way. Matt put his faith in the law and Fisk seemed to be running a legitimate mayoral campaign. He didn't cheat the system to get into office, just somehow managed to win over the public's perception as he ran his campaign on removing vigilantes. People love to question how a corrupt and overweight businessman with a known history of breaking the law and lying made their way into political power, but I fear that's unfortunately the most realistic thing to ever happen in the MCU. And those allegories are strong here. And it honestly seems like Fisk is doing a better job controlling himself than Matt is. He almost gets you to believe that he's a completely changed man as he threatens people with cheesesteaks now instead of blowing their mind with a car door. He somehow doesn't lose his temper in a room full of children singing the worst cover of We Built This City that I've ever heard. Genuinely, seeing him get so fed up and have to feign his excitement for their performance is one of the funniest things in any season of Daredevil. Vincent D'Onofrio plays the ambiguity of his turn so well through performance alone as he fakes smiles and really sells this new leaf being turned. I might just be incredibly gullible, but it genuinely seemed like at first Fisk really wanted to make the city better in his own twisted ways, but when the reveal hits that he secretly had Adam as his tortured prisoner the entire time, it recontextualized everything for me in a brilliant way. Fisk was never able to let go and use that boy like a punching bag to get it all out of his system. It's the exact thing that shows you why, despite all of their similarities, Matt and Fisk will always be different. Matt actually gave this new start his all and tried to be a better person, while Fisk was only ever faking it. Masks are a big theme of this series as well, with Matt, Fisk, and Muse effectively using one in some sense. Matt obviously hides his identity as Daredevil to let the devil out. Muse's mask lets him become his true self, and Fisk puts on this persona to appear as this functioning member of society. I think Daredevil is at its best when they're constantly questioning morality and the concept of being a vigilante as a whole, so I really appreciated this direction. And thus, when Fisk's mask starts to slip more and more as he establishes the anti-vigilante task force and starts lying about what happened to make his team look better, it becomes abundantly clear how rotten he will always be. There is no redemption for a monster like Wilson Fisk. Also, I think it's funny that part of Fisk's relapse is him starting to eat more food. He tried to cut back when he went into office, but when he's torturing Adam, we see him indulging in his gluttony. They made him earn being fat, which is objectively hilarious, but also a neat way to visually show his transformation into the Kingpin again. There is nothing Daredevil fans love more than seeing Matt at his most miserable and the Kingpin start to develop unhealthy eating habits. When it all finally came crashing down for the two of them in episode 6 though, I was losing my mind. The cross-cutting between all their actions, despite all their differences, really drives home just how similar these two characters are. Those similarities are the marking of any great rivalry, and further cement those two as my favorite superhero and villain feud. They have such a magnetic pull towards each other that makes collisions inevitable. No matter how hard they try and stay away, no matter how many years go between confrontations, they will always meet again, and it will be explosive. As toxic of a relationship as they come, always bringing the worst out of each other, and God, is it so compelling to watch. I have deeply missed seeing Matt and Fisk bounce off of each other like this. The show would not work nearly as well as it does if Fisk wasn't given equal screen time to Matt like he is here. He's effectively a secondary protagonist of the series as we watch these dueling narratives play out, even if he does just look like the most evil person to ever live. But if there's one character who I'm so glad got time in this show, it's Benjamin Leonard Poindexter. Man, I see why he goes by Dex. What kind of name is that? I am so happy they found a way to include him in this series, especially after season 3's cliffhanger, because it's crazy to think about the fact that he almost wasn't in this show or the planned 4th season of the Netflix show. Despite his limited screen time, he has a huge presence in this season that continues to prove why he's arguably the best written villain in the entire MCU. Someone who is able to perfectly walk the line between heartbreaking tragedy and ruthless serial killer tendencies. One moment I feel so bad for him because he was doing such a great job being better in life, and the other, I am fully prepared to make the national news for what he did to Foggy. But even then, hearing him mutter under his breath things like, "What did you do?" after shooting Foggy makes you question if his heart really is in this and if he's beyond saving or not. There's clearly manipulation at play, as a mentally ill man is being taken advantage of at every turn, and that hurts to see. The way Vanessa gets him out of protective care, when he can barely hold a pen to sign the contract, is insane levels of manipulation. It goes a long way to paint him as such a tragic figure, and then he shoots up an entire room full of civilians who were just vibing and not remotely part of his contract, immediately reminding you that he's become an unstoppable monster with the coolest abilities ever. There is unfortunately nothing cooler than seeing him take out people with cue balls. The fact that his reintroduction to this show has him literally killing a fly says a lot to how twisted he is. And quick side note off the record, because out of context this is gonna sound insane, but I love how sadistic they made Bullseye. He took every opportunity he had to kill innocent people for the love of the game alone, and it put the biggest smile on my face. Okay, on second thought, that's not gonna sound good even in context, context, I'm just sick and twisted as well, I think. But if there's one thing the MCU is lacking, it's reoccurring villains that just love to make everyone's life a living hell. Someone whose sole purpose is to make our hero as miserable as possible, and Dex fits that mold to a T. It really makes him stand out as a character amongst other heroes in the MCU. He is the polar opposite of Matt, as he's more than willing to kill people for his own enjoyment, and I think it gives them such a fascinating rivalry, constantly popping up in each other's lives as they're destined to do this forever. Even down to the little pat Dex gives Matt after killing Foggy, as if this was a fun time for him. And I need to stop and give Wilson Bethel the credit he deserves for playing this character so well. If it wasn't clear before, he deserves to be in the conversation for best comic book casting choices. Every little mannerism, every little twitch in his face, the way he moves his body, the cold, calculating stares that he gives, it all comes together to create this chilling villain. And we get to focus on these manic stares he gives with just his eyes alone. And I love the way he's almost shot like a horror movie villain. As they build up the suspense of his arrival, he portrays a level of sinister villain that we've not seen before in the MCU to a scary degree. You cannot teach that kind of evil, which honestly makes me wonder if he's just Bullseye in real life with how natural this performance is. And if so, somebody please investigate that man. Yet somehow, he maintains that emotional core where you almost can't help but feel for him. Right when it seems like things can't get worse, they hit you with a heartbreaking reminder that he started out as a victim in all this. A lost soul seeking guidance in a world that is happy to take advantage of him. And I kinda love the idea of Bullseye becoming so obsessed with being Daredevil's greatest enemy that he wants nothing more than to turn Daredevil into an unwilling North Star and someone to guide him in life and set his moral compass straight, but Matt will only ever see Fisk as his arch enemy. The look on Dex's face when Matt takes the bullet for Fisk, literally defending his worst enemy, like Dex mentioned earlier in the prison interrogation, is so telling. He seemed genuinely shocked that Matt would do such a thing, and I want that to get really under his skin, motivate him into doing anything he can to not just ruin Matt's life and take that title as his greatest enemy, but finally find that North Star and someone he can constantly look to. And when that guiding force lets him down, it's gonna send him off the deep end in ways we can't even fathom right now. And quick tangent I want to go on while talking about Matt taking the bullet for Fisk, because a lot of people have been wondering why he would do such a thing, but personally, I think it's very interesting because it effectively makes Matt bulletproof from Fisk ever revealing his identity. If Fisk tells the world that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, then he has to admit that a vigilante saved his life and his entire campaign comes crumbling around him. So it almost levels the playing field in a way, as Matt has that sacrifice hanging over his head, taunting him with the knowledge that he almost owes him for that. Sorry, I just had to get that out of my system. Let me talk about Bullseye. My favorite interaction between them this season, though, is that aforementioned prison cell conversation. The fact that Dex is able to taunt Matt so much that he loses his temper, smashing his face into the table so many times, is such a great way to show how Matt is unable to resist his violent urges. And the cruel twist of irony that Matt lashing out against Bullseye is exactly what he needed to escape as he knocked that tooth loose is peak writing. Had Matt managed to keep his cool, Bullseye would still be in prison, and maybe he would have even died there after Fisk moved him into the general population. But he just couldn't help himself, and because of that, he gave this horrifying serial killer exactly what he needed to terrorize people on the streets once again. And now he's gonna have all that guilt weighing on his conscience, and it's so cool that they managed to find a way to do the iconic moment of Bullseye escaping prison with only his tooth. I was pointing at my screen and clapping alone in my room when he started doing that. It might be the single most badass thing anyone will ever do in the entire MCU. By far, the most emotional part of this entire season, though, is the tragedy of the White Tiger, Hector Ayala. This arc only lasts like 2.5 episodes, but it left such a lasting mark on not just me, but the entire series itself. The effects of the trial inform Matt's decision-making going forward in the season, as it makes him feel so much guilt and resentment towards the legal system. Hector was a good man with hopes of returning home to hear the Koki sing and dreams of protecting this city because he knows it's the right thing to do. A direct catalyst of Matt's absence as Daredevil, Hector is picking up the slack and fighting the good fight that Matt knows all too well. His role in this series is to act as a mirror to Matt and remind him of what he gave up on. Hector is also there to serve as this beacon of innocence, being corrupted by a world that doesn't want to see him thriving in it. The police clearly had it out to get him when he intervened in the assault, and the accidental death had him dead to rights. Both Matt and Hector knew that he doesn't deserve what they're trying to do to him, but the thing is, they've been backed into this corner where the entire legal system is working against this so-called quote-unquote cop killer, and when the machine wants you behind bars, it's hard to fight against such a powerful force. So I think using this story as a way to show the corruption in the police force goes a very long way in taking a very powerful stance against the boys in blue that I was very caught by surprise with. For as much as I love that Netflix show, it is strikingly pro-cop in a way that hardly addresses the obvious faults in that system. So watching Born Again take such a definitive stance against police brutality and the system as a whole, by using the character of the White Tiger to show what happens to not just a person of color who is taken advantage of by the system, but a vigilante being caught in the agendas that are trying to get him taken off the streets when he's just trying to help people, is very effective storytelling. We get to see Matt pushed into a place he's very unfamiliar with in the courtroom, as he's hardly ever had to deal with going up against the entire police force, and you can see that stress Matt is put under as his star witness, the ace in the hole to getting Hector off scot-free, is afraid to testify against the police out of fear for his life. It forces Matt to go to lengths that he never would have a few years ago, and shows just how committed he is to this new lifestyle where he's not a vigilante, as he outs Hector as the White Tiger. He more than anyone should know just how scary it is for your secret identity to be in the hands of the wrong people who don't deserve to know. Watching Matt use his secret identity to win the court case created this very interesting wrinkle in their dynamic, as he betrayed Hector's trust, and while he does avoid him getting life in prison, he now puts that new life in danger. Matt's system of beliefs has shifted to the extreme opposite end of the spectrum as he places his full faith in the law, hoping that it will protect Hector, to keep living this lie that he doesn't need to be Daredevil. But even with him doing such a crazy maneuver like that, Matt is basically arguing to himself in favor of how useful vigilantes are for the city, as he's showing the good work they can do on a day-to-day basis that the news isn't covering. And I think it works really well as a wake-up call to Matt. And in a universe like the MCU that can go so cosmic and expansive, it's nice to get this street-level perspective on vigilantism and showing the overwhelming positives of having these superheroes out on the streets doing what needs to be done to keep these people safe. And man, do I love seeing episodes entirely dedicated to Matt's work as a lawyer. Watching him make solid arguments that fall apart, and then seeing him scramble to recover and coming back to win the case in the end is so thrilling in his own right. It's a little hard with how the season ends, but I pray in the future of this series we have more episodes like this one because it blew me away. It's probably the episode of the show that feels the most like the Netflix series as we dive into a character-focused story debating the themes of vigilantism and the role of a superhero in this world. It is incredibly well written, with terrific performances all around. The overwhelming emotion on Hector's face when the verdict is read is such a beautiful visual and almost had me ready to tear up because of just how well his character had been defined before then in a short amount of time. You just couldn't help but root for him. It is a masterful performance by the late great Camar de los Reyes. He absolutely shined as Hector Ayala, and I'm so sad that he didn't get to see how beloved his character is. Such a likable hero and someone who brought a ton of heart to this series in such a short amount of time. I'm so glad that his legacy is going to be playing such an important character in the MCU and comics as a whole, as the White Tiger was the first ever Latin American comic book character in general. So this is a huge deal for playing such a significant superhero. May he rest in peace. It makes his sudden assassination in the series all the more tragic as that beautiful moment is ruined thanks to a bunch of Punisher-loving fanboys. Oh my god, I don't think I've ever been more furious watching something than I was seeing that scene. I was ready to jump through the screen and strangle that bozo myself. A heartbreaking example that even in the rare instances when the system works, that same system is the reason he's dead. The people who are sworn to live and serve by it have co-opted this symbol to enact their own twisted vigilante justice as they take an innocent man away from us far too soon. But if that wasn't enough to have me sobbing, the sounds of the waves crashing and the Koki whistling over the credits had me ready to end it all. They are evil for making me hear that. I hope Marvel is ready to pay for my therapy because I don't think I'm ever going to recover from that. Just twisting the knife in the most heart-wrenching way. But that tragedy naturally transitions into the Punisher story arc this season as Matt is forced to confront Frank again after all those years. It's crazy to think that it's been 9 years to the day that we last saw Daredevil and the Punisher interact, but despite all that time and the distance they've put between each other, Charlie and John are able to pick up right where they left off and continue that electric dynamic in a way that only they could. And after all these years, I had the absolute biggest smile on my face hearing Frank call Daredevil Red again. I could genuinely watch these two characters argue and bicker for an entire season of television and it would never get old. The writing between them is always so thought-provoking as they try and help each other from their own perspective. Matt is doing everything in his power to try and save Frank's soul and stop him from being this ruthless killer. Meanwhile, Frank does everything he can to push Matt over the edge and prove to him that he really is just one bad day away from becoming just like him. And I especially love that this season picks up with them interacting while Matt is at the absolute lowest point in life. If there was ever a time he would finally cross that line to become the killer Frank Frank knows he could be, it's now, and he fully exploits that during their confrontation. Matt doesn't even have to tell Frank that he tried to kill Bullseye and that he actively wants him dead. He can read it from his expression alone because he's been in that position and knows what it's like to want bloodthirsty revenge. I especially love that it's only when Foggy is brought up that Matt completely loses it and Frank is finally able to break through Matt's protective armor, actively crying in front of him because he knows that the both of them don't deserve to be alive, while the kindest, purest soul out there is sitting in a box rotting away. Man, every single time this show talked about Foggy, I wanted to bawl my eyes out, but especially here, seeing Matt break down destroyed me. It is a testament to how well written these two heroes are that they can have these kinds of conversations as they debate morality and whether or not it's right to kill someone, all while finding a way to make me tear up like a little baby. It's probably the only time in the entire season that Matt gets to really be honest with himself, and I think it's fascinating that it's only with the Punisher that he can properly open up. And since Marvel just kind of dropped it in the middle of the season, I'm gonna do the same and talk about the bottle episode in the middle of the video right now. It's become one of the most controversial elements of the season, and for the life of me, I can't understand why. I personally really love side quests like this and think they add a lot to the series. Marvel shows are so often way too short that we don't get enough time to breathe with these characters. Born Again putting a pause on the main story to show a day in the life of Matt Murdock is a great way for us to see how he's operating without all these big dramatic events going on. Just letting us see that even in his normal life, he can't resist the call to being Daredevil. A standard meeting at the bank is flipped on its head as Matt has to find a way to save everyone inside without outing himself as a vigilante. That's such a cool concept to me, and I think they execute it really well here. It almost feels like a Hitman level in a way, as we get to see Matt disguise himself and take out each robber one by one as they showcase his abilities in this low-key spectacle. And it's not like the episode has no purpose either, as it's a prime example of Matt being forced into a situation where he has to relapse on violence as he's pushed closer towards becoming Daredevil again. And the events of this episode are a direct cause of Vanessa's conflict with Luca. They are building off of what came before while setting up the next few episodes in a very creative way that expands on this in a new environment, and one that we hardly get to see. So I really don't like how people call this episode filler when it ties directly into the overarching plot, just not in the way any of us really expected. If anything, we need more quote-unquote filler episodes in these shows. I love seeing the main story just as much as the next guy, but it's episodes like this that give these characters more depth and allow us to see them in new lights and scenarios. I am such a sucker for street-level stories like this as we get to see what makes Matt a hero more than just stopping citywide events, or that one time he stopped the Hand from destroying the dragon bones that kept New York City up, because that's a thing that happened and is officially canon now. Those Netflix shows are insane, man. I love it. And what I think is really cool is that episode 5 is the most I've ever seen a Daredevil episode feel like an issue of the comics, as they take a break from the main arc to do a fun one-shot self-contained story. It's something the comics do all the time, and because of the nature of television, we so often miss out on little moments like that. And I think that having an entire episode dedicated to showing Matt stop a bank robbery, something so simplistic that every superhero is known for doing, but we don't get to see nearly enough nowadays, and I think it goes a long way in showing his heroism. And if it's not for you, that's fine. But I think it's boring to be limited to only what's going on in the main story. Give us more room for fun adventures in the day-to-day lives of these heroes. It also helps that with the release schedule, they dropped the Masterful episode 6 at the same time, so it wasn't like they held us off another week from getting back to the main story. It's absolutely the best of both worlds. We were eating good that week. Also, I think it's funny that the most self-contained episode is also the one most connected to the wider MCU. Matt may be trapped in a single location, but the addition of Ms. Marvel's problematic dad immediately kicks the door open on some fun MCU connections that I have longed for. After having Daredevil so isolated on Netflix, barely able to reference the larger MCU outside of the big green guy and the incident, it is so rewarding to hear him casually say Ms. Marvel's name, and I swear to God, Marvel better follow through on that promise of Matt having dinner with the Khan family. There is nothing I want to see more than Kamala's relentless optimism paired with Matt's desperate depression. It would be such a fun dynamic to play around with. For being the only episode of the series that wasn't changed during the creative overhaul, the bank heist was a shockingly great break from the action and something I think we need much more of in the genre. And while I could gush over how great this show is all day long, I think it's important to mention that it isn't perfect. Like I mentioned earlier, Born Again is two different distinct creative visions Frankenstein together, and there's no bigger example of that than with how the character of Muse is handled. I couldn't tell you enough just how excited I was to see Muse in this series. He's on my Mount Rushmore of Daredevil villains along with Kingpin, Bullseye, and of course Stiltman, so I had high expectations for him. He's arguably Daredevil's most twisted adversary as someone with a mysterious background, seemingly just in it for the love of the game alone. As cruel as they come, with an inherent sadistic nature, using his victims' blood to create masterpieces and send a message, he is a haunting character to look at, let alone when you take into account his gruesome works of art. And Born Again was so close to perfecting his character. Up until episode 7, I would argue that Muse was on the verge of getting a flawless adaptation. His design from the comics was translated almost 1-to-1, and dare I say, even improved upon in some ways? It's a small change, but I love that we can see his eyes. Not only do reflection shots like this go crazy hard, but it makes him all the more terrifying. With every little expression, we get this window into the soul of a serial killer, serving as an eerie reminder that there's a person deep down under all that blood-stained canvas. Which, by the way, is such an inspired idea. I love a character who fully commits to the bit, so seeing him don this stapled together canvas suit is gorgeous. Every last detail about his design, from the dripping eyes to the 3 buttons on his suspenders, was impeccably translated to live action. But what I loved most about Muse pre-episode 7 was how the show quietly built up to him. Showing a mysterious painter all the way back in episode 1 making a statement about the Kingpin becoming mayor immediately created this sense of intrigue for comic fans, but for the unsuspecting, that's just some guy doing graffiti. And considering that this is New York City, that's as common as the rats. But each new episode of the series would include an establishing shot with Muse's newest artwork, and I think it was such a nice touch for world building. While Matt is hyper-focused on being a slutty, self-destructive lawyer, there's a serial killer silently building up a reputation in the background. It's incredibly impactful to tease Muse like that until he's unavoidable and Matt is forced to suit up again to stop him, which hits like crack. Finally getting to see that masked menace in his full glory during episode 6 is one of the most satisfying moments in the entire season, and I really love Angela being the reason Matt comes back to being Daredevil. Her story is living proof that the system can't help everyone, so saving her almost gives Matt a second chance at making sure nobody gets hurt after what happened to Hector. The writing up to this point for the entire Muse plot is extremely well done, as it ties into pretty much every character's arc in the show. He brings Daredevil out of the shadows after a year, furthers Fisk and Heather's hatred of vigilantes, and provides a nice epilogue to the White Tiger story with Angela. It's not a stretch to say that Muse was the bloody, beating heart of this show, as everything revolved around him and built up to this pivotal moment at the end of episode 6, and God did it deliver. The score kicking in when Daredevil returns and kicks his face in gives me chills every time I hear it, and I would not hesitate to say that this fight scene here is the best of the entire season. Every little movement carefully planned out as these two characters fight each other with distinct fighting styles is genuinely fantastic. I love that Muse moves around like a little freak, all while Daredevil has that bone-crunching action, and just tanks hits from him like it's nothing. Aura farming while a little girl is dying on the table is crazy. But I do really love that during this fight we see 2 distinct parts of Matt vying for control here. The first is this bloodthirsty revenge he has against Muse as we see him strangling him to death, and the second is his good nature as he realizes throughout the fight that he needs to lock in and stop what he's doing to save Angela, as he lets him get away because he knows that protecting Angela is much more important to that, and it's all done through some excellent visual body language. Coming out of that episode, I was overwhelmed with excitement to see how they'd wrap up this Muse plotline. And then episode 7 happened, which immediately took away all of Muse's aura. This is easily the weakest episode of the season for me, as I don't think they had nearly enough time to tell the story they were trying to, and I'm not the biggest fan of the creative decisions here, so it really sticks out like a sore thumb amongst all these other great episodes of the show. It's not even like it's an abomination for anything. It's way better than any episode of another show. It's just underwhelming compared to what comes before, and especially after. One mid-episode won't ruin an otherwise great season for me, but it's just a real shame that they had to rush through the end of this story and give it such a definitive ending, with a few tweaks to make his backstory more ambiguous, and having Fisk act like he's dead when he actually survives. I feel like they could have stuck the landing in a major way, because the main reason it doesn't work for me is that disconnect between how Muse acts here and how we saw him previously. His mystique is ripped away from him as we find out that he's nothing more than a spoiled rich kid, which I think is a mistake for a character who is known for not having a backstory. That being said, I think the scene itself when we do learn his backstory is incredibly tense and well acted, but man, that characterization felt really off to me. I hope I can find proof of this in the editing room, but if I can't, please take this next part with a grain of salt. I might be spreading misinformation on live, but I vividly remember rumors last year stating that the original version of Born Again had Muse as a villain of the week. So he was barely in this show during the original cut. I'm very glad that the new creative team did what they could to give him a larger presence in the series, including the entirety of the episode 6 fight scene with him, him, but unfortunately, you can definitely see that original version of the character left over in episode 7. Considering the fact that they reshot 8 and 9 after this, I really wish they had more time to redo this episode as a whole because it was very jarring against the backdrop of everything else. I especially think the fight choreography suffers the most here. We get a cool moment like Matt shooting the grappling hook through his shoulder, which goes crazy, but the obsessive camera cuts felt really out of place compared to the really well done action scenes in the previous episode. As much as I'm gonna miss seeing Muse be my favorite little freak, Matt painting the canvas with his blood as his body becomes one final work of art is an incredibly poetic way for him to go out. I just wish he didn't have to die so soon, as he very easily could have been a season-long villain, but I hope they find a way to expand on him in season 2. We already know that Muse will be returning in some capacity thanks to this trailer on set, so find some way to set that character right. In an ideal world, they could just bring back that version of the character and reveal he lied about his backstory to get sympathy from Heather and keep that background a mystery because Hunter Doohan still gave a great performance. Just make Muse a mutant or something and bring him back to life with his powers from the comics. The fact that he's basically a void to the senses makes it so interesting to see him fight Daredevil, as it not just evens the playing field, but it puts Matt at a severe disadvantage in a really fun way. Or maybe we have it so that he inspired a copycat, and that is the real Muse going forward. I would just love to see what the new team could do with him when they aren't tied to pre-existing footage and story beats they have to hit. They clearly knew what they were doing in the previous episodes with how they presented Muse, so I trust they'll find a satisfying way to continue his story. Another place Born Again falters is in its supporting cast. Part of the reason why the Netflix series works as well as it does is because every character is fully fleshed out and well defined. Born Again takes a very different approach as it hyper-focuses on Matt and Fisk, meaning that a lot of the side characters don't get too much to do for most of the season. Thankfully, these problems get fixed towards the end of the season as the new creative team goes out of their way to shine a light on these often forgotten characters. It goes a long way in setting things right and making those necessary improvements, but it still doesn't excuse the fact that there isn't a single character that's even on the same level as interest as Foggy and Karen were. It's the biggest holdover from that original show that they were stuck with, and while they do their best to make it work, it holds Born Again back from reaching its full potential. Look at the Karen episode from season 3 as a prime example of how to flesh out your supporting cast. I think a good way to define if your supporting characters are well done is to look at them outside of the main narrative. If I asked you to tell me something about Daniel Blake that doesn't relate to Mayor Fisk, you wouldn't be able to. Yeah, he likes to go clubbing and do casual ketamine, which is wild, but what do you actually know about him as a person? His background, his origin, his friends, his family, his wants, his interests, stuff like that. Then if I asked you that same question for a character like Foggy, you would be able to tell me his life story because of how well fleshed out he was. Whether that be seeing his relationship with Marcy or knowing about his family's butcher shop, even going back as far as to see him taking Punjabi in college. We get to see his full history and it helps us fall in love with these characters in a way that Born Again just doesn't reach the same heights of. I have faith that as we go into the future of the show, the new team can put a heavier emphasis on these characters as we've already seen they're capable of that, so just do that more please. I especially want to see that with Kirsten McDuffie, my favorite member of Daredevil's supporting cast not named Foggy Nelson. I mentioned before that Mark Waid's run on Daredevil is my all-time favorite, and her involvement in that is a huge reason as to why. Matt and Kirsten's chemistry together is palpable as they bounce off each other in some really fun ways. They have this great back and forth as she tries to get him to admit to being Daredevil while he's doing everything possible to throw her off the scent, and I think that could be such a fun element to introduce in season 2. Thankfully, they nailed Kirsten's personality, and Nikki M. James does a great job bringing her to life. Her effortless charisma as she plays with Matt and teases him feels ripped straight out of the comics. Now they just need to give her literally anything to do. Let me see her and Matt work on cases together as their relationship flourishes. She's one of the few people who can go toe-to-toe with Matt in a verbal war of sarcasm, and I am dying for them to expand on that. It should be their utmost priority to showcase her going into next season. It's not a surprise that the best Kirsten moments in this show come in episodes 1, 8, and 9. So I feel like I'm a broken record at this point, but I trust the new creative team that they're going to handle Kirsten correctly. When it comes to his current love interest, Heather Glenn, I'm honestly surprised that I can still talk about her in the present tense. Knowing how things go in the comics for her, I really thought she'd be hanging on a meat hook in Muse's lair halfway through the season, but instead we get to spend the entire show with her, and I think she is a fascinating part of this cast to watch because of how unexpected her characterization was. Now, I wouldn't say that she's the most fleshed out or well-written character, but I do think there are some very interesting ideas that surround her that make her compelling to watch, if that makes any sense at all. Having someone so staunchly against vigilantism to the point where she becomes becomes a Fisk supporter, unknowingly dating Daredevil is a great idea. When it came to Karen and Foggy, they were definitely against that, but Matt was able to win them over. Heather, on the other hand, is on a whole new level, as she wrote an entire book about how much she hates vigilantes. I don't know if there's ever a way they can redeem her, but for the majority of the show, her and Matt are playing this cat and mouse type game, as she is constantly trying to figure out what makes him tick, and he gets more and more distant with her. And God, how I have missed the identity drama in this show. Watching Matt scramble to hide what he was up to, despite being covered in bruises, is always ridiculously entertaining. That drama is taken up to a whole new level though when he has someone in his life who can psychoanalyze him like nobody else has. Matt was basically forced into therapy, and it still isn't helping him. That Daredevil depression is stronger than crack in the 80s. But Heather is also one of the few side characters who gets to have her own story, as we see her acting as Fisk and Vanessa's couple's therapist. She acts as the connective tissue between Matt and Fisk's worlds, which culminates in that incredible gala that she spends angry at Matt. And you know what? I get it. Matt must look so insane to Heather. He tells her that their relationship feels fake and then immediately starts acting paranoid, saying that the mayor is personally trying to hurt him but won't explain why. Out of context, he must seem like he's on the hardest drugs ever to her. But on the other side of things, Heather doesn't do the necessary work to hear Matt out and trust him. He has a very public history with Fisk, and when he's showing every sign of something being wrong, she is very dismissive of him. And I think while people might get frustrated at her as a character, I find it fascinating to watch because these are two incredibly flawed people in a relationship that is not meant to last. I definitely think that this season could have used more time to focus on Matt and Heather's relationship because while I do think they have some fun chemistry together, I also don't understand from what we see why they would be with each other. They don't seem to agree on anything, so unless it's just raw sexual attraction that they cannot resist each other, I wish we'd have gotten a little more time just to understand what they see in each other in the first place. I don't even know what the endgame is for her as a character going into next season, because her joining Fisk's side caught me completely by surprise, but I really like how Born Again is using her character as a way to do commentary on people who have such tunnel vision hatred for one specific thing that they're willing to align themselves with obviously terrible regimes like the Fisk mayoral campaign, just because he's against that one thing she despises, to where she's actively ignoring all the terrible things he's done in his past, just because he almost vindicates her view on vigilantes in a way. And not only is that incredibly relevant commentary for today's political climate, but I think as a character in a superhero show, that's a very interesting idea to explore. And I would love to see season 2 heavily tackle that, as we see her views continue to get challenged over and over again, and if she can find a way to break out of this cult or if she's a lost cause entirely. But I do think it's funny that the writers effectively break Matt and Heather up like this. They clearly didn't have any interest in continuing that relationship, as they seemingly wanted to get right back to Matt and Karen, which is real. As for the other characters introduced, they range from nothing to compelling and everything in between. Daniel is probably the most enjoyable to watch, but that's entirely down to performance alone. Michael Gandolfini is so fun to watch as he glazes Fisk harder than anyone ever has in human history, and that says a lot because Wesley was doing tricks on it. And then there's Buck, who's pretty much just British Wesley, but he has this natural suaveness to him that's only comparable to a character like James Bond. I really hope we get to see him develop more as we watch him inevitably transform into his comic persona of Bullet. And then Cherry's just kind of there, but it's BB who became my favorite addition with just one scene that recontextualized her entire presence in this series. The fact that she's willing to drag her own name through the mud by pushing Fisk's propaganda just so she can expose the truth under a pseudonym is such a genius idea for a journalist character. In a perfect world, next season we'll get to see her and Karen work together as she helps take down Fisk. Third time's gotta be the charm, right? Let's just hope that for her sake, they don't run back the fight of the century. Then there's someone like Cole North, and boy, where do I even start with this one? As a massive fan of Chip Zdarsky's perfect Daredevil run, I was really looking forward to seeing Cole adapted here. He's one of the most interesting new additions to the Daredevil mythos and someone who would really help flesh out this world and continue to ask the hard-hitting questions about vigilantism, so it only made sense to introduce him in this season where that theme is very much so at the forefront. That being said, I really don't like his characterization in this show. In the comics, Cole North is as big of a rule follower as you can find. He is an extreme example of someone who is unwilling to do the wrong thing, and it puts him at such an interesting conflict with a character like Daredevil. Not only is he already breaking the law by being a vigilante, but in this run, Matt accidentally kills someone and now has to deal with law enforcement. It puts him at odds with Cole in one of the most satisfying character arcs I've ever read in comics as he slowly learns the value of vigilantes in the world. So it feels like they're doing a disservice to his character by having him, at the very least, start out as a corrupt cop working for for Fisk, and the man who killed the White Tiger? The Cole North I know from the comics would have never done that. It's not like his character is beyond saving, as I think you could develop him into the Cole North I know and love, but if they stick with him as a corrupt cop, it would be a crazy level of character assassination. I know the writers have made it clear that they're taking some creative liberties, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because they haven't let me down yet, but as it stands right now, I'm not the biggest fan of him as an adaptation. He works well within the context of the show itself, it's just that knowing who Cole North is supposed to be that I have a hard time really enjoying what his character is doing. Just set him up to be someone who is heavily against the vigilantes just as much as he is corrupt police officers, and I'll be happy. Alright, I guess I'll circle back to Cherry for a second, because despite him just kind of existing, I feel like there could have been something to his character. In a just universe where they never had the previous version of the show, it should have been Brett Mahoney in his plays. Someone who already has an established relationship with both Matt and Daredevil. If Brett learned Matt's identity, it would hit a lot harder than some bald guy we just met. He is by far the weakest character of the season, especially if he's going to be part of Matt's army. There are tiny little hints of personality that sneak through the cracks, as he gives criminals drugs so they can stand trial, or, okay, well that's really all we have to work with, but this new team is insanely talented. If anyone can make Cherry interesting, it's them. I know this next part might be sacrilegious to say and will most likely lead to my untimely death, but I honestly think that Born Again does improve on the Netflix series in a few key ways. This is all coming from a place of love. Those first 3 seasons are incredibly special to me, but there's always room for growth. Let's start with the camera work, because I think there is a very clear improvement on what came before. The Netflix show was mostly shot with still cameras. The only time we ever got real consistent movement was when they locked in for those breathtaking action scenes. But trust me, you can tell that's where their budget went each season. And thankfully, with that mouse money, we don't have to worry about that anymore. While some of the other episodes have some genuinely great shots, it's when Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead are directing that you can really see this show reach its full visual potential. The camera moves with such a kinetic energy to it that enhances the scene in a way that a static shot couldn't. There's so much thought and care into how the camera operates, giving the series a unique visual style as they take full advantage of this medium. I especially love Benson and Moorhead's approach to making the camera its own character. In an interview where they were talking about episode 1's fight scene, they explained their reasoning for that one being shot the way it is, and how they wanted the camera to move along the train tracks of destiny. We're basically taken on a tour of Josie's bar throughout this fight, meaning that we miss out on some of the action at some points, but it's all done for a reason. It gives the camera its own perspective as it marches forward and makes the action follow it, not the other way around, effectively making it so that no matter how hard Matt fought, it gives us this sense of dread and uneasiness, as he was always meant to lose and end up in that one location on the roof. I think that kind of thoughtfulness goes a long way and shows just how good these two are at their job. And on top of their dynamic camera work, their cinematography looks so good when they have the reins. It's very different from what came before on Netflix, as it definitely doesn't reach the height of season 1's neon-soaked aesthetic, but I don't think anything will ever top that. But when Benson and Moorhead are at the helm, we're able to see some truly gorgeous cinematography as they put their own spin on how a Daredevil show could look. I understand it's constantly going to be compared to the Netflix series, and I get why, but I look at this in the same way I would to a new artist drawing a comic I like. It takes a second to get used to that new look, but once you settle into it, you can appreciate it for what it is. And I won't pretend like the visuals are perfect all the time. It's not as vibrant as I would like it to be. They could up the contrast a little bit and tone it down on the fogginess. Not in that way. But I think overall, I just like seeing a show that has a distinct creative style. And I think that Benson and Moorhead's style is very complementary to the world of Daredevil. I especially love their use of dedicated colors and how we see different characters shot with their own light. Fisk is in a pure white, Matt in a bloody flashing red, and Dex in this cold blue. It makes them all stand out and gives the show its own visual language. And God, do I love how they made it so the lights turn blue whenever Dex locks in on something. It's not only a really inspired idea and a great usage of artistic freedom, but it just looks cool as hell. The fact that it's all done practically too, with color changing light bulbs, is a really nice attention to detail that shows just how much they care about their craft. But without a doubt, my favorite aspect of this show's visual style is how they portray Matt's radar sense. We're no longer stuck with scenes where we just see him staring off into the distance, as they take it to a whole new level here. The way Matt hyper-focuses on something by dolly zooming out to a fisheye lens is so creative. I love how they had to invent a new technology to create a shot like this, stitching together different angles to show us the world as Matt sees it. At first, an overwhelming amount of information, as he sees more people than we can process, but he hones in on something specific as the aspect ratio tightens in on that. Originally, I wasn't the biggest fan of this show being shot in widescreen, but seeing how they intentionally intentionally did that so they can give themselves room to play around with the aspect ratio in this meta way to show Matt's radar sense is genius. Every time they cut to a shot like that, I sat up in my seat and locked in because I knew shit was about to pick up. And a little detail I haven't seen nearly enough people appreciate is that they used lens flares to show his sense in action. They appear and move in such specific ways that gets as close as you can to replicating those iconic radar lines from the comics in a realistic and practical way. It's a nice attention to detail that elevates an already impressive shot, which I didn't think was possible. And as much as I do miss John Passagnano's brilliant soundtrack, the Newton brothers put such an inventive spin on that iconic score. Adding an organ and a choir to the Daredevil theme takes it to a whole other level. They keep that same leitmotif, but it stands out much more with this epic sense of scale that fits the tragic themes of the season. It's a lot more noticeable, and while that might not be everybody's cup of tea, I personally really enjoy hearing a big bombastic score and just soaking in every little note as it plays over a scene. Passagnano's soundtrack had a much more subdued energy when it came to his masterful melodies, while the Newton brothers blasted at full volume, giving us such adrenaline-pumping needle drops when that organ hits. Like when Matt and Fisk find each other for the first time in 7 episodes at that gala, and the organ hits when they lock eyes. Is it really locking eyes in Daredevil's case? When they notice each other, I was ready to ascend. I get chills every single time as they play that theme we're so familiar with, but in this new tone that really drives home the point of this new era we're in. And the choir especially helps to tie together the biblical themes of the Daredevil character. In moments like this, when Matt is at the courtroom, it has such an ethereal feeling to it. I honestly think I'm gonna levitate just listening to it here. The Newton brothers do such a great job of taking the familiar and putting a fresh spin on it, and it allows for a new soundtrack that not only meets the expectation of the previous one, but surpasses it in some ways, like with the main theme. I know that's going to be controversial, and you can throw as many rocks at me as you'd like, but I think that the addition of the choir and the organ makes this theme much more fitting for a character like Daredevil. But without a doubt, the biggest example of Born Again improving on the Netflix series is the costume design. It is miles better than we had it on Netflix. I know that's obviously a very low bar to clear, as anyone can tell you that those Netflix shows never did those characters' costumes justice, but it's still worth appreciating because I think everybody looks their best in this series. The biggest example of that is the new Daredevil costume we get, which I think looks gorgeous. As much as I hope that one day we do get a truly comic-accurate Daredevil costume in that skin-tight spandex an acrobat would wear, I'm totally okay with him rocking the armored look because it makes sense for a grounded superhero that's constantly getting shot at. Marvel Studios loves to take their time getting a character to a fully comic-accurate look, and you can tell that they're doing that with Daredevil here as they take the model of the Netflix suit and put their own spin on it as they strip back almost all of the black padded elements and give us the beautifully bright red Daredevil costume we have deserved to see for the last decade. I can't believe it's taken us this long to see him in a costume that's actually red and not maroon. It immediately makes this the best Daredevil costume of all time for me. That is, of course, until we get the costume he's gonna be rocking next season with those big, beautiful double Ds. The black look goes so hard, but it's especially made better with all those little cracks in the paint showing the red surface underneath. I cannot wait to see that suit in live action next year, man. They are teasing us an evil amount with all those set photos. We're no longer stuck with these cheap creatives who don't want these characters to look how they do in the comics and get scared anytime they see a bright color. We're gonna be able to see superheroes and villains alike with actual logos now. That obviously should have been the status quo, but I'm just grateful that this show has done all they can to gradually fix that in a natural way that also just looks really good. And one last thing I want to mention that I would classify as an improvement is the fact that New York City feels truly alive and born again. That's not to say that it didn't in the Netflix show, but I think the introduction of the BB Report goes a very long way in establishing what makes this universe so distinct. We get these brief interviews with the people of New York as we get to see their reaction to the big events that are playing out as the show is progressing. And especially in a universe like the MCU where there's a cataclysmic event every other Thursday, I love getting this perspective from the absolute bottom of the ground level. Hearing people talk about why they voted for Fisk or why they support Daredevil, along with seeing footage of something like the Swordsman of all people fighting crime in the streets, it all comes together to make the city feel alive, and I really appreciate that. These heroes live in a fully realized version of New York City with colorful characters and citizens who aren't afraid to stand up for what they believe in. And one thing we just found out that I think is so cool is that the BB Report interviews were of actual random New Yorkers on the street. The fact that they went through the extra effort to hire people to get real life street interviews and ask them about Marvel questions shows so much love and care and makes these interviews hit even harder. I genuinely thought these were all character actors, so the fact that these are just real people and they have so much charisma like that is really impressive, especially that old guy on the bench who was talking about blowing people's brains out. That's a real person out there in the world, and I think that's incredible that we know that now. It's one of the best parts of this show, and I think that seeing them go the extra mile to make them as authentic as possible and highlight the culture and people of New York City like this is one of the best decisions they made in the entire creative process here. Honestly, it'd be really cool if they brought it into something like Spider-Man Brand New Day as well. Imagine having the film go back and forth between reports from B.B. Urich and J. Jonah Jameson as we get to see two different perspectives on what's happening. One, an incredibly biased news report, and the second, how the citizens are taking that news and what they think of Spider-Man and hopefully what Daredevil would be doing. It's such a simple way to give these citizens a presence in the show, but it can't be overstated enough just how far it goes in making the city feel like a character in and of itself. Alright, it's probably been an hour of me talking at this point considering how long I've been recording, so let's dive into that finale because holy shit, that was insane! It felt like I was getting shot after shot after shot of pure adrenaline pumped directly into my heart. Setting the stage for Fisk's takeover during the Blackout Purge goes insanely hard. At least this is probably the most normal thing to happen in New York City in years. I pray for them once the century arrives shortly after this. This was honestly a perfect finale. I love how much it set things in motion for not just the future of this series, but the MCU as a whole. I get some people don't like how open-ended it was and how it mostly just set up season 2 rather than resolving all these character arcs and plot threads, which is very fair, but this was always meant to be an 18-episode season. So I'm looking at this as a mid-season finale as we gear up for the back half dropping next March. It's one continuous story broken up for the sheer reason that they can take their time developing it and rewrite the rest of the season from scratch this time around, and that works with me. It's really great to see how the Blackout brings Fisk's true intentions to light as he goes full fascist and locks down the city. Anyone disagreeing with him is gone, or in the case of the Commissioner, straight up ripped in half, which is f***ing insane, by the way. Never in my life did I think we'd see something so violent and gory in the MCU, let alone on Disney Plus of all places. I doubt I'm going to be able to even show you what happens, so just enjoy looking at these blurry pixels for now. Vincent D'Onofrio was teasing that they did something that put all of his other violent outbursts to shame, and he was shocked made it into the final cut, which I did not believe for a second after those Moon Knight comments from a few years ago. But Jesus Christ, he proved me wrong. Let's just say, the Commissioner isn't the only one whose jaw was dropping. It is such a shocking amount of gore that not only puts into perspective how powerful Kingpin is at this point physically, but also politically, as he's able to openly eviscerate the Commissioner and squash his head like a grape without any consequences as he's basically cheered on the entire time. There has never been a more unstoppable force or immovable object for Matt Murdock to deal with, and I am beyond excited to see how he manages to square up with that. The entire time we've known Fisk in the MCU, he's always been operating with restraints. He did a great job working from the shadows, but he had to stay cordial if he ever wanted his operation to run smoothly. Now that he's the one making the rules and operating under martial law, we are seeing Fisk enter a whole new era where he can become his true self and nobody can stop him from doing anything, and that's going to be terrifying going forward. And for a season that was all about constantly breaking Matt Murdock down and rebuilding it back up again, I think it's very important to have him lose here. We've never really seen the Kingpin win at the end of a season. He always just gets thrown in prison only to come back again. So to have him get this victory and plunge the entire show into darkness both literally and metaphorically makes complete sense and sets up for an even more exciting season next year. It's always darkest before the dawn. And if that anti-fascist rebellion speech Matt gave wasn't enough of a hint, it's going to be so powerful seeing him fight through that darkness and these insurmountable odds as an act of defiance to stand up to the Kingpin even when the entire city is against him. I picture this Growing Pains season thematically as the Empire Strikes Back and Daredevil's story, as season 2 is going to be the return of the Jedi, which sounds like a great premise for me. As long as they don't include Ewoks here, it's terrifying when they don't blink. Unsurprisingly though, my favorite aspect of this finale is that we get to see Matt, Frank, and Karen reunited at long last. As much as I've enjoyed this season, the moment we had all three of these characters interacting with each other again, I realized just how much we've been truly missing out on their dynamics and histories. Seeing them embark on a new mission and working together truly felt like we were back for the first time and had me shadowboxing in my room out of pure excitement. I've never been the biggest fan of Matt and Karen as a couple, as I think season 2 didn't make the strongest argument for them, especially with Elektra getting in the mix. But here, they fully won me over as they're constantly flirting with each other and reliving all that history. It warms my heart so much and made me want to see them properly together for the first time in years. The sparks were undeniably flying as they were practically flexing how strong their chemistry was. You can almost immediately see the impact Karen has on Matt's life right when she returns to it, as he starts acting rationally again when there's someone there to ground him to reality. But what I think is such a cool character moment for Matt in the finale is right when he's about to go on this suicide mission to try and stop Fisk, and Karen is able to talk him down. It's nice to see him stop his self-destructive tendencies for once, and considering where Matt was in season 3, where he was willing to die for this city, now wanting to live for it is so inspiring and a
great beat for his character arc this season. Honestly though, I think my favorite moment for this entire finale is when Karen gives Matt that speech at Josie's. Her words hold so much weight as they talk about what Foggy would have wanted and how the battle between light and dark in Matt is what makes him so special as a person. It really feels like for the first time in every season of Daredevil that Karen and Matt are finally on the same page with each other. There's no secrets or dishonesty. I truly believe her when she says she believes in him. And it's nice to see that kind of unwavering support, especially after Matt was so isolated for the entire season. I was ready to run through a wall by the time that speech ended, let alone how it's followed up by a Radiohead needle drop and an incredibly powerful speech about being the city without fear from Matt. You can't end an episode better than that. And also, when Matt pulled out that avocados at law nameplate, I basically burst into tears right away. And I love that Matt made that silly little inside joke real. You can really tell that new creative team loves that Netflix show. I especially love that Karen was the one to get Frank back into the mix as she made the call for him to protect Matt. They have such a special bond together, and I'm glad that Born Again continued to build off of it. Karen is probably the only person Frank would actually listen to, and getting a taste of their relationship again was electric. And God, does it pay off in the most satisfying ways, as this episode was heavily focused on the Punisher, maybe more than Daredevil himself. This was the first time we've truly got to see Frank in a proper bloodbath since that prison fight, and it does not disappoint. I was not prepared to see him openly blow a guy's brains out or slit someone's throat, but it is exactly the kind of Punisher action we deserve to be seeing. I especially love that the Punisher's action scenes were shot in slow motion, so we can see how brutal he is, as Daredevil is in normal speed, giving them each a distinct visual style in the way they fight. And it really lets you soak in just how bloody the Punisher is. It's like the creative team didn't know they were on Disney Plus, and we are all better off for it.
What I think works best about Frank's violence in this scene too is that it's not glorified, it's horrified. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a bar, so I'm gonna roll with it. They never try and make it seem like what he's doing is cool, or they play it up in some badass way. They're showing you this horrifying violence and the toll it takes on him to do it. When the central theme of this show is that violence comes with a cost, I think it's very interesting to throw a character like the Punisher in there, someone who is so accustomed to being violent, and then juxtaposing that with Matt, who's trying his best to avoid embracing those violent tendencies, and then just let those two characters have a natural reaction to the way they fight. There is genuinely nothing more satisfying watching Frank go into the city during a blackout as a one-man army and take a stand against corrupt police officers that idolize him when they absolutely shouldn't. I think this is a vast improvement on the moment in the comics where the Punisher rips up his own logo in front of the police officers. We get to see Frank directly taking a stand and straight up just killing those corrupt cops. It is so much more in character for him because he would have no respect at all for these people. He sees how ironic and idiotic it is that the cops wear his symbol when they don't even understand his ideals and the pain he goes through. It's like they're spitting in his face as they try and be like him, despite the fact that nobody can be like Frank Castle. I'm so grateful to Born Again for taking such a definitive stand on police brutality and showing the Punisher actually shut those assholes up. I hope to God everyone out there with a Punisher sticker on their car with the thin blue line on it takes it off immediately because they are completely worthless and an insult to that character. Special shout out to when Frank says he wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire. That is some real hater energy right there and got the biggest laugh out of me the entire season. And with Frank locked up like a wild animal at the end of this series, it clearly sets the stage for his special presentation. You're welcome for bringing those back, by the way, and I cannot wait for that. Give me an hour of the Punisher ripping through hordes of dirty cops before ending the whole thing by killing Powell, and that would be the easiest 5 stars of my life. As for the future of this series and Season 2, I think it's very clear that the army Matt is going to assemble will finally reunite the Defenders after all these years. Just the thought of that has me kicking my feet like a schoolgirl. I am unreasonably excited that we're on the cusp of seeing these characters back together again. I really hope that at the bare minimum, we at least get to see Luke, Danny, and Jessica reunite with Matt here. While the Defenders series was all over the place, the reason I enjoyed it so much is entirely due to their character interactions. So the prospect of seeing them in a show like Born Again that could actually write them well and give them an interesting conflict with the Kingpin is the easiest win of all time. It's also the perfect way to naturally reintegrate them into the MCU as Matt goes and recruits them, because they're pretty much the only superhero friends that could help him on the East Coast, especially Luke Cage. I have no clue how mayoral elections work, but I would love if he's the one to run for mayor and get Fisk out of office as Harlem's hero. As for some other characters, I assume we'll see Swordsman appear next season, which is fun, but I would especially love to see other heroes get involved with this, like Echo, considering she already has beef with the Kingpin going back before Matt does, and maybe this is where the new White Tiger gets her start. In a perfect world, we'd also get to see Spider-Man show up in this, considering that New York is kind of his territory, but I guess J. Jonah Jameson was correct about him all along because that menace was nowhere to be seen when the city was in blackout all night long. Until further notice, he is on fraud watch.
I assume Season 2 will wrap things up before Brand New Day, but man, it is the biggest missed opportunity of all time that MCU Spider-Man can't team up with Daredevil to fight the Kingpin here. There's never been a more natural way to get these two characters working together, as they're forced into this resistance and Peter has no choice but to open up if he wants to save the city, but because of this annoying rights issue, we're not allowed to have nice things, I guess. I need to go back in time and stop Marvel from ever selling those rights. We are losing out on history because of corporate greed. The only thing more upsetting than that is the fact that I finally have to admit that I was wrong, and Foggy Nelson may actually be dead after all. God, just saying that out loud for the first time makes me want to puke. I can't believe we might actually have to go on without him in our lives. I understand if they want to stick to their decision and not undo Matt's character arc, but I would also completely excuse that because I think we need someone like Foggy in Matt's life, and I miss them together so much you don't understand. Finally learning the truth that Vanessa put the hit out on Foggy because he uncovered this criminal conspiracy on Red Hook that basically allowed them to operate without any jurisdiction is insane. He's just a silly little Foggy bear. He didn't mean to do anything. But the fact that the Red Hook plotline remains unresolved gives me a lot of hope and an unhealthy level of delusion that he'll be back in Season 2 in some capacity. We already know that Eldon will be appearing, but I'm talking about in flesh and in person. No flashbacks. Just have it be revealed that they restarted his heart on the way to the hospital and Foggy was put into witness protection and adapt the secret life of Foggy Nelson in some way. Whatever they do, I'm not flinching until I see that body being burned. Foggy Nelson will return to us in Season 2. I'm calling it now. We will see the avocados at law meet again.
Alright, the big question a lot of people are going to be wondering coming out of this season is how it stacks up against the Netflix series. So I figured I'd rank all 4 seasons. Coming in at the bottom is Season 2, and this is coming from a Season 2 defender. I think that is genuinely a really good season of television. If it was just the Punisher arc, it would be up there as some of the best superhero storytelling of all time, but unfortunately, the hand stuff ties it down a lot for me. That being said, I still think it's severely underrated and deserves a lot more praise. Then taking the number 3 spot is Daredevil Born Again. For all the reasons I've just talked about, you know my thoughts on this show. I don't have to restate it, right? Because then this video would be like 2 hours long, and it's already long enough. Taking home the silver medal is Season 1. One of the best seasons of television I will ever see. It made me fall in love with this character and his world, and I am forever grateful that it exists. I can rewatch it endlessly and never get tired. The only reason that it takes number 2 is that Daredevil Season 3 is the best season of television I have ever seen, and will have that number 1 slot on lock forever. I have never been so emotionally attached to a season of television before in my life. This is a masterpiece in every sense of the word, from the action to the acting to the storytelling. This is the peak of the superhero genre. Every single character is fully fleshed out and given so many interesting things to do, and it all culminates in this brutal brawl that I just can't help but get enough of. So all in all, seeing all 4 seasons lined up like this is a great run for a TV show. Taking a step back to look at the show as a whole and taking into consideration what went on behind the scenes, I think this is the best version of Daredevil Born Again we could have gotten. Despite having to build off of a foundation that has a confusing hatred for what came before, the new creative team manages to splice it up in a way that delivers several satisfying and emotional story arcs that set things up in a big way for the future. At its best, Daredevil Born Again is a beautiful continuation of the Netflix show that fans have been dying for the last 7 years. Matt Murdock is finally back in the spotlight where he belongs and continues to grow and evolve in some very interesting ways. The parallels between him and Fisk are so compelling and paint these characters in entirely new lights, as it truly feels like a worthy successor to the Netflix series. At its worst, Born Again is dragged down by the original mid-show that is actively working against everything that worked before in an attempt to do something new. The new creative team does miracle work covering up the vast majority of that original show with some great material, but the leftover elements hold this series back from reaching its full potential. But despite all that, I'm not sad or upset about this first season of the show not being perfect. I'm happy about the future and what we have to look forward to just next year. The new team has proven to me that they understand the character of Daredevil and are determined to do not just him, but his entire supporting cast justice. This whole season works as a meta-commentary on how we can't run from the past and need to embrace it. It's given me a lot of faith in the people behind the scenes as we get this preview of what they're capable of when they're not tied down to existing material, and it blew my mind. I'm so glad we only have to wait a year for next season, because if I had to wait 3 years like Marvel's making us do for some of these other shows, I would be setting Kevin Feige's office on fire right now. That being said, I can't be held responsible for my actions when I snap having to wait that long, but until then, just knowing that Daredevil is in good hands is enough to keep me satisfied. I owe Dario Scartapane, Justin Benson, and Aaron Moorhead my life for fixing this show and delivering on the version of Daredevil I've always wanted to see in a fully realized version of the MCU. His future could not be brighter. Unless they add Stiltman! I'm gonna mention this every time until it happens, but I need my long-legged king in the MCU already.
Let Matthew Lillard play him in season 2 or something. Just give me what I want. I'm tired of waiting. I'll take matters into my own hands and get the job done myself if I have to. While I do that, why don't you let me know what you thought of Daredevil Born Again? I would genuinely love to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below. And while you're at it, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you don't do it, I'm gonna rip your face in half like Fisk did. I don't exactly know how right now since I probably couldn't do that to an apple, but I'll find a way.